So let's just go ahead and start with our prayers. So we'll just do our refuge and bodhicitta prayer. Let's remember our motivation. All of us are here to learn, understand, reflect, think about how our mind works so that we can pacify our minds. As the Buddha said, subdue your mind. That's the most important teaching. Because that's the way to subduing our suffering, bring ultimate happiness, bring happiness to everyone else, make the world a better place, work for the benefit of all beings. It's all at the root is this mind. And we take refuge in the Buddha and the Dharma and the Sangha, who will help us. We're like the doctor, the medicine, and the nurses, or the support. You know, the Buddha, the Dharma is just the medicine, and the Sangha, the community, the spiritual community, are the support for us. So we take refuge in them because that's the way to reach our final goal. So I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. How wonderful it would be if all sentient beings were to abide in equanimity, free from closeness of attachment and distance of hatred. May they abide in equanimity. I myself will cause them to abide in equanimity. Please, Guru Deity, bless me to be able to do this. How wonderful it would be if all sentient beings were to achieve Buddhahood. May they achieve Buddhahood. I myself will cause them to achieve Buddhahood. Please, Guru Deity, bless me to be able to do this. How wonderful it would be if all sentient beings were free from suffering and the causes. May they be free from suffering and its causes. I myself will cause them to be free from suffering and its causes. Please, Guru Deity, bless me to be able to do this. And finally, how wonderful it would be if all sentient beings were never separated from the happiness of higher rebirth and liberation. May they never be separated from these. I myself will cause them never to be separated from these. Please, Guru Deity, bless me to be able to do this. Okay. So we'll start with a meditation. We'll kind of do a kind of a breathing meditation, a concentration meditation, and then we'll try to see if we can watch our mind for a little bit. So let's take our posture, correct posture. If you remember the 7 points, the 7-point Vajrapani posture that they talk about, but most importantly, our backs are straight with a natural curvature. Our right hand over left, if you have it, and the thumb touching, if you have it like that, or if you have your hand on your knee, faced palm down. So that's another possibility. And we can talk about when either of them is useful. Actually, sometimes it's useful to use one, sometimes it's useful to use the other. So anyway, so let's take a few deep breaths. We'll do a slow body scan. That's one way that really helps calm their monkey mind. There are various ways. One of them we did earlier, which is a 9-point breathing meditation. A body scan is sometimes very useful as well. So start with your feet. Maybe they're touching the ground. The sole of your foot is touching the ground, or the side of your leg or your feet are touching the cushion, or the rug on which the cushion is. So feel the sensation. Try to feel all the cells in the foot. If you feel any tension, you can breathe into it. So like that, move up to the ankle, the calf, the front of the leg. Maybe you can feel the temperature of the air with the skin on your leg. The knee, the thighs, your hips, your buttocks, your stomach, your chest, your back, your upper back, your shoulders, and go down to the arms. So your muscles in your, upper arm, your elbows, your forearm, your hands, your fingers, the back of your hand. And then slowly move back up the arm to your shoulders. Release any tension in your shoulders. That's a normal spot for tension. Okay. Focus on your neck. Relax it. Your chin. Your ears. Your lips. Cheeks. Nose. Eyes. The backs of your eyes. Your temple. And finally, crown of your head. So breathe for a little bit here. Just feel the body grounded. The mind relaxed. And slowly bring your attention to the mind. Just the thing that is aware of thoughts and feelings, of anger, of generosity, all those things. So there is a mind that is aware, it senses, it's conscious. So with a little, almost like a little part of your mind that sits on the back of, back of your head or the back of your mind and just watches the rest of the mind. It's watching to see how the thoughts arise, how they float by, but not holding on to any of the thoughts and not following them. So just looking at the mind that is clear, it's like a reflection, reflects like a mirror. Whatever appears, it just reflects it, illuminates it, whatever you want to use the word. It's clear and it's formless. And it's vast. So just for a few minutes, we'll just be present as to what appears to the mind. But not getting attached to the things that appear. No judgments, no attractions. Just let them appear and let them disappear. So we'll do this for a few minutes. And remember, if you do get stuck in a rabbit hole of a thought, it's all right. Just detach from that and just go back to watching the mind. And then when you're ready, you can relax the mind, open your eyes, and just gently bring yourself back. By the way, can you all hear me okay? Yeah, just nod your head. Okay, good. I don't have my, I forgot to plug in my normal microphone that I use, but in any case.
Shankha, I can hear you, but I can't see you.
Really? Is that true for
Yeah.
everyone? Is that true for you, Kathleen?
I can hear and see you.
Oh,
I can hear and see you.
I can hear and see you as well, Shankha.
okay. So Barbara, I can see you. I have my video on, so obviously because everyone else can see me, but maybe your karma isn't ripening today, you know, like it should. I'm sorry. You can try, if you wish, you can try to log out and log back in. That will probably fix it if you want to do that.
Okay, you know what? That's what I'm going to do, Shankha.
Okay. That's fine then. That's fine. I'll keep going and you can just come. So what was it like to watch the mind? I mean, were you able to were you able to kind of get a feeling of how the thoughts arise, or the mind without the thoughts? Anybody was able to do you have any comments on what it was like? Was it frustrating? Were you able to notice the thoughts? How did they appear? How did they go away? Okay. Nobody wants to put themselves out. Okay, that's fine.
I will. I've just had kind of a crazy day, so it was little difficult to, I kept thinking about everything I still need to do. So I could calm, and then those thoughts would come up, and I would try to follow. But yeah, so
you were having kind of scattered mind, is what you were saying. Is that correct?
that's a perfect word, scattered. And that's what I actually said earlier today. I just feel so scattered right now.
Right. And did you find yourself like chasing down the thoughts, or you just saw that like there were lots of them arising?
I think I would start to chase, and more would arise, but then I could calm, and then they come back up.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
We might talk about that, today. There's actually a lot of, Buddhist research, by the masters on all these, there's labels and all these things. There's something called mental scattering versus excitation versus, all these things.
Okay.
So yeah, it's very useful to recognize them for what they are, and because then you can apply various antidotes to them. There's also antidotes to them. So
Yes.
yeah. Anyway, okay, good. Well, I mean, that's okay. It's how it is. Some days are good, some days are bad, and our minds are designed. I mean, their function is to conceptualize and go down paths, right? Otherwise survive. So yeah, so it's okay. So that's just normal. So I think we just have to kind of, sometimes it's hard to, sometimes it's hard to not get frustrated, So I think we just have to be patient with ourselves and just know that, it's okay if it's doing that, that's just part of what it's doing right now. Okay. Anyone else have any? Barbara, can you see me now?
I cannot. However, I think it's probably my internet connection. We're having a lot of weather here in Milwaukee, lots of wind and snow, and I think it's probably that. But I can hear you just fine. Okay. So that's the important part for me.
Okay. All right, great. Okay. Did anyone have any questions from last week, from the, from whatever meditations you did, or from any questions from the material or what I said? Things weren't clear?
I have been thinking a lot since the last class, Shankha, about the mind. The mind itself, and like where it is and why it doesn't leave. I'm just having a lot of thoughts like that, thinking about the mind.
Why the mind doesn't leave? What do you mean? I hope the mind doesn't leave.
Well, no, but it's formless. It's not, I don't know where it's contained within me.
Yeah.
And I just think, gosh, I wonder why it doesn't just like leave.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Why it doesn't kind of like, if it's not contained in something, why doesn't it just disassociate itself from your body and just kind of just float away, right? Kind of like Mars lots its atmosphere, right?
Exactly. Yes.
It's a good question. I don't have an answer to it, but you can certainly investigate it. And it's actually just the investigation itself is the interesting bit. It's not necessarily what conclusion you get to, but most of this is, it's kind of like meditating on like, anything, right? So you meditate on, death and impermanence, let's say, right? So that, but it's not that the conclusion, right? We all know what the conclusion is. That's not the interesting bit. The interesting bit really is the process of getting to the conclusion you already know intellectually, right? So it's the same way, so that's the process that makes us, what they say is, gain the realization of death and impermanence, right? Is that continual, engagement of that process that actually changes our perception, but also it changes the way we internalize it. Right now we haven't internalized death and impermanence, but if we continue to meditate on it, with attention and alertness and all that stuff, then yeah, that's the important bit, is the investigation part. To ask questions and to investigate. So that really is what meditation is about, and especially this, right, about meditation on the mind, is really to investigate what it's like, And the reason we know all these things about the definition of the mind, that it's clear and knowing. You'll find that in the script, in the text, the definition. When they say mind, they mean something very, very specific. Mind is an awareness that is clear and knowing. And the reason they came up with this definition is, the Buddha himself and others, they investigated, right? And so that's, somebody came up with the definition first, and he got there because he did all this investigation, even though, we kind of assume the mind is taken for granted, right? We know the conclusion, we know we have a mind, we know we think, but we don't really consider all the other bits of it. So anyway, okay. Anyone else? Oh, yes. Someone unmuted, MJ Whiteman unmuted himself or herself. So you want to say something?
Hi.
Oh, hi there.
I didn't especially want to say something. I just unmuted myself by accident, I think. But I haven't been able to catch these classes, and I just dropped in. I just got home, but I thought, gee, I'd really like to catch some kind of a class. So
Okay.
I hope you don't mind if I just kind of sit in. I'm a part of the Taos group,
Yes.
the KTBC and the City Garba. And so anyway,
Okay.
is it all right if I just drop
Absolutely.
in?
Yeah. It's an open, anybody can drop in. So, okay, very
Thank
good.
you.
Well, glad
So
to
I don't know what the question was. So
that's all right then. We'll just
Yeah.
keep going.
thank you. Yeah.
Okay, so great. So then today we get to my favorite bit, which is kind of like talking specifically about how we know what we know, because there's the term epistemology, right? There's about the mind. How does the mind know what it knows, and what are the various states of it, and when we meditate, how to recognize what state we're in, so that we can apply antidotes and so forth and so on. And if we hopefully we'll have time to get to how to, not just hopefully, it's important that we get to it. So what does it mean when we meditate on the cushion? How does it apply to life, right? I mean, basically the same qualities of the mind that we're cultivating on the cushion is exactly what we'll need during our daily actions and of body, speech, and mind, right? So that's kind of what we'll get, what I'm hoping to cover today. So I kind of I kind of tangentially referred to perception, right? The direct perception, conceptual perception. So in Buddhism, when they talk about a mind, when we talk about mind, we think about the mental consciousness, right? Wherever it is, the thing that Barbara was trying to find, or looking at, and that thing, right? But actually, in Buddhist philosophy, we actually have 6 minds, right? So there's the 5 minds that are associated with our senses, right? So there's an eye consciousness, and a nose, and a smell consciousness, a taste consciousness, and so forth and so on, right? So, and I'll get to that in a minute, but not to be confused with the organ that actually does the tasting and the seeing and the smelling and so forth and so on, right? So there are these minds for each sense, right? And then there's the mental consciousness, with which we think, right? So those are the 6 minds that all of us has. All of us human beings has. There are beings in the formless realms, for example, who have mental consciousness, but because they don't have a form, they don't have the sense consciousnesses necessarily. So so for us at least, and all animals and so forth and so on, they have, for the most part, they have these 6 consciousnesses. And these 6 consciousnesses, the 5 sense consciousnesses perceive things directly, right? In other words, there's no discriminating thought that is applied. When the eye sees, when the eye organ comes into contact with an object, right? It sees, right? We call it seeing, and the eye consciousness that is, quote unquote, behind the eye organ, then sees it sees like kind of like almost like blur, it sees like a shape, it sees color, for example. Like it doesn't say it's red. It just says, I just, there's a color here, there's a color, if you're looking at a carpet, you see different colors, that kind of thing, right? It just senses but that's all it does, right? And same with smell, it doesn't think, oh gosh, that smell is so wonderful or whatever. It just smells, right? Same thing with taste and touch and so forth and so on. So that's called direct perception, because there is no conceptual consciousness, there's no thinking, no discrimination, like and dislike, those kind of things happening, or feelings of like and dislike, those kind of things aren't happening. They're just plain perceiving. The mental consciousness is the only one that can actually conceptualize, right? So it's the only one that has, is also called the conceptual, consciousness, right? So, but it also can have direct perception, right? So if you are meditating on the emptiness of something, right? Or emptiness in general, or emptiness of the self, or the emptiness of an object, of inherent existence, when you recognize the emptiness of that object, then you directly perceive it. It's direct, there's no thinking behind it. It sees the emptiness as it appears, right? So their mental consciousness is also capable of direct perception. But for us ordinary beings, by the way, is a technical term that's used for people like us who don't have direct perception of emptiness. If you have direct perception of emptiness, you're no longer an ordinary being, you're an Arya, that's another, So for us ordinary beings, whenever the mental consciousness always engage in conceptual thought, right? So in other words, let's take 2 examples. So if I see Kathleen, right? I can see Kathleen. So I see a square, I see her glasses, I see her face, and so forth and so on, right? My eye consciousness sees, but immediately the mental consciousness, the second moment, split, I don't know, you split the moment, the mental consciousness comes in and then says, oh, there's too much backlighting or not, or there's Kathleen. By the way, Kathleen, there's no backlighting. I'm just saying, that I'm just, So, or that's Kathleen, right? It's not Barbara. I mean, all these kinds of thoughts appear, right? Without us making an effort, right? The other way also is, without necessarily engaging with the eye or the smell or any of the sense consciousness, I can bring the image of something in my mind, right? Let's say the Space Needle in Seattle, right? I'm not in Seattle, I'm not looking at the Space Needle, but I know what the Space Needle looks like. I can bring that image to my mind and I can see it, right? See it with my mental consciousness. So that's another kind of, you know, and I say that's a Space Needle, right? So that's another kind of mental, you know, conceptual consciousness that the mind can engage. So it can engage by itself, or it can engage through, you know, conceptually through the, you know, by concepts. Sorry, by concepts arising of labeling and liking, disliking, so forth and so on, something that you see or, you know, hear or smell. And so that's kind of the mind. You know, when we say the mind, there are all these 6 things and all these different ways we perceive, right? You know, perceive, you know, through our senses or through our mental consciousness. And all of these are, you know, all of these minds, a sense conscious, you know, the taste, touch, all these consciousnesses, plus the mental consciousness, all of them have the properties of clarity and knowingness, right? Each of them, when it engages with an object, it reflects that object immediately like a mirror, and it knows the object, you know, through it, that consciousness, right? So when I see Kathleen's picture again, my eye consciousness, you know, clearly, and it sees her, you know, my eye consciousness sees the shapes and the colors, you know, etc., that appears on the square, you know, clearly like in a mirror, right, without any dirt, dust on it, and it's of course knows it because it perceives it, right? So it's aware of the shapes and colors. So that's the property of the mind, right? And the thing that so we talked about direct perception, and we talked about, you know, conceptual, conceptual thought and conceptual perception, if you will. So how do they come into play, right? So one of the ways when people talk about, you know, us ordinary beings not seeing the nature of reality as it exists, right? What they're saying is how things appear to us, right? Appear to the conceptual consciousness, appear to the mental consciousness, actually, appear to the mental consciousness is not how it appears, in the sense like, if the mind were to directly perceive the object, the reality as it is not concordant. It's not the same as, if you will, it doesn't concord with what we see, what we perceive through conceptual thought. So when we see something, we label it, we do all the stuff with it. But if we were to perceive it directly, if we were to perceive the, you know, without conceptual thought, we would see something else. So that's when they mean the nature, you know, we are ignorant. When they talk about ignorance, right? You know, attachment, anger, ignorance are 3 poisons, right? So when they talk about ignorance, ignorance means seeing reality opposite to how it appears, right? And so the interesting bit is, how do these things relate? Direct perception, conceptual perception relate to our daily life, right? And how do our attachments and aversions and anger, jealousy, pride, and generosity, and you know, love, and all these things appear, right? So one way to think about it is that, you know, the mental consciousness, let's say, you know, so this, to the sense consciousness, to a sense consciousness, let's say I, you know, the I, you know, the thing that sees, the I, or, you know, I consciousness. So to it, you know, the object that of attention, the object that it is engaging with, right? Through the eye organ, but nevertheless, the object is to the object. So that's called the object of attention. And the object that it perceives, the object is also called object of apprehension. What it apprehends are the same, right? So eye consciousness, when, you know, if I'm looking at the picture of the refuge tree behind me, right? The tanka behind me. The eye consciousness, what it sees, what the eye consciousness perceives as the object of, when it engages with the object, is the same as the object of apprehension, what it actually perceives, right? So they're the same. The problem with our mental consciousness of us ordinary beings don't perceive emptiness is that the object of attention and the object of apprehension are not the same. So an example is, for example, let's take the Space Needle that I talked about earlier. Actually, it's taken from a very, the Space Needle example is taken from this book I love. So anyway, so somebody used it before. I didn't make it up. So let's take the example of a Space Needle. If I see a picture of a Space Needle, right? Let's say a Space Needle appears in front of me. The picture appears in front of me. I immediately recognize it as the Space Needle, right? I mean, same is true for you, right? If you saw a picture of your mother, you would recognize her immediately as your mother, even though she's not in front of you, right? So the object of attention, the picture of a mother or the mental image or the picture of a Space Needle, and the object of apprehension, my mother or the Space Needle, are the same. We perceive it the same way, right? I mean, that's how, once you think about it or whatever, you could say, oh yeah, of course, that's a picture of a Space Needle. That's not the Space Needle. But that's not how our perception immediately appears, right? When I see Kathleen's picture, I see Kathleen's picture, but I don't see it as Kathleen's picture. I see it as Kathleen, right? Even though Kathleen's not in front of me. So the object of apprehension and the object of attention, we look at it as, they're the same, but obviously they're not, right? And that's where, so what happens is the mind has what's called a generic image, right? I have a generic image in my mind of the Space Needle because maybe I've gone to Seattle and I've seen the Space Needle. I know what it looks like. Maybe I've seen many pictures of the Space Needle. Maybe somebody's told me what a Space Needle looks like, the shape and the color and so forth and so on, right? So I have this image, generic image it's called, of the Space Needle in my mental consciousness, right? So when it appears in some picture or something in front of me, my conceptual consciousness immediately kicks in and says, that's a Space Needle, right? Even though the object of apprehension, the object of attention, the picture of the Space Needle, and the object of apprehension, the Space Needle, are not the same, they appear to me like they're the same, right? And that is the centrality of why we perceive things the way we do, right? That's why we believe our thoughts, right? We go down some rabbit hole of some thought, right? And we believe it to be true because our object of apprehension and the object of attention, the thought is the object of attention, but our object of apprehension is, whatever the thought brings up, feelings, etc., we are convinced that they are correct, right? And that's the kind of how the mental consciousness works, right? It labels things, it attaches likes and dislikes and various things to it, and that's what they become to us. That's why when some person X appears in front of me, I immediately have an aversion to that person. I want to cross the street to pass the person, right? Because I have that person I have attached whatever the label is, like, I don't like the person, let's say, right? I have attached a label with the person, and when that person appears, the label appears with it immediately, and the object of, the two objects become one, right? I mean, I'm simplifying it a lot here. I mean, if somebody like, if Venerable George were here, he would point out holes in what I'm saying, but I'm simplifying, a technical, but it's important to understand how our sense perceptions perceive and how our mental perception perceives. Our mental perception engages with conceptual thought. And because of that, how we, what appears to our mental consciousness is not what actually appears, right? That's why things appear permanent to us, because, we don't see its degeneration, we don't see it as it appears. Our conceptual thought kicks in, and our attachments, like, I like the ice cream, so it's gonna, I mean, that's a bad example, but, when I'm a child, I think my mother's always going to be there, right? She's permanent, right? Actually, even as an adult, one thinks that until one's mother passes away, but it's kind of like that, right? I mean, even though we know intellectually that she's not going to be around, we still think of her as permanent, right? So that's kind of where the root of a lot of our ignorance is. And the perception, so the direct perception is always correct, right? I mean, direct perception of what the eye perceives, or the smell consciousness perceives, and so forth and so on, they're always correct because they perceive exactly what appears. The mental consciousness, of course, perceives correctly if it perceives emptiness of something, right? But if it's perceiving with conceptual thought, it's most likely not perceiving it correctly. It's, although, okay, I'm sorry, I have to backtrack. It does perceive correctly there's different philosophical schools, but nevertheless, in our school, it does perceive correctly, but there are instances where it perceives incorrectly. For example, even the sense consciousness can perceive incorrectly. For example, the example they use is if I have jaundice, for example, then things that are white, like a white snow mountain, is going to appear yellow to me, right? So there's incorrect. That's an incorrect consciousness, right? Because the thing is that really white. Everybody else's sense perception, sees it as white, right? So it can be, it can be incorrect, but in usual cases they're correct. Similarly, when our mental perception can be incorrect also at times, like for example, if we have a when we're sitting in a train, for example, and the train starts moving, it actually looks like, the platform is, it's going in the other direction, right? Or if you pass somebody, then it just seems like we're stationary, but the other person is moving, right, in the other direction. I mean, it's still perceiving, the mental consciousness is, but it's incorrect because, it's the other person is stationary and we're the ones who are moving, right? So there are occasions like, there are many occasions like that where it's incorrect. So there's, so consciousness, direct and conceptual consciousness can also be correct and incorrect, right? So we have to recognize it for what it is, right? I mean, that's the reason why one studies these things, is so that when we recognize something in our minds, we can see, we can understand, is it correct? Is it incorrect, right? And then we can take action based on that, right? So this is a topic that requires some effort. It requires some investigation, and there's many texts that are written about it, and so it's a pretty big topic. So, but it's really, if you do spend some effort on it, it's actually quite beneficial to to, to understand how all these things happen, all these things appear, how things appear and how we perceive them. Anyway, any questions at the moment? I'm sure I've totally confused you, but that's okay, Yes, Kathleen, you have to unmute yourself though.
Yeah, I have a question. So these two phrases that you mentioned, object of attention and object of apprehension. I want to make sure I understand the difference.
Right. So actually, yeah. So attention is a specific, and I was actually going to get to it, but attention here actually means something very specific. Attention means what it is. The attention is the quality of the mind that moves it towards an object. That's how they define it. So in other words, it's the mental factor, and I'll talk about mental factors in a minute, but there are many, the mind has many factors, qualities, I guess you could say, that arise. And so, it's a thing that, says, oh, I should, I would bring my eye consciousness towards Kathleen's square, right? So that's the object. So what the eye consciousness then sees, the Kathleen square, is the object of attention. The square is the object of attention, and my eye consciousness brought attention to that object, right? It came into contact with that object, and so so that's the object of attention. What the eye consciousness moved to, right, and came into contact with. Object of apprehension is what it actually perceives, right? So my eye consciousness perceives the colors, the shapes, not the glasses, just the colors, the colors and shape of the glasses. That's all it sees, right? My mental consciousness then puts it all together and says, oh, those are glasses, that's hair, that's her face, and that's Kathleen, right? Because I have a generic image of what Kathleen looks like. And that happens to map, to what Kathleen appears on the screen, right? So that's then the mental so what my eye consciousness sees, the object of apprehension, what it perceives, I should say perceives, what it perceives, the object of apprehension, and the object that actually it engages with are the same, right? But for mental consciousness, a conceptual consciousness, that is not necessarily true, right? Because this mental consciousness, through the icons, perceives the square and perceives the color, all this other stuff. So that's the object of apprehension. Or I'm sorry, I shouldn't say that. When the mental consciousness, let's take a different example. When the mental consciousness brings up an image of an object to it, right? When I think of a space needle, for example, right? So the object of attention is the image of the space needle, but what I think about is actually the space needle, right? I actually put them together, right? My conceptual consciousness puts them together. That's why if I have dislike for a person, then I equate dislike with the person, right? It becomes one and the same. So that's why, so the object of apprehension, object of attention are different things for the mental conceptual consciousness, but I make them the same. And similarly in, why we get afraid in dreams and so forth and so on, right? It's just something it's just an appearance. It has no reality to it, right? In a dream. But we get scared, we laugh, we cry, all kinds of things happen, right? So, or take the classic example of you walking through a dark forest and you see a snake, right? And you get scared. But actually, that's a bad example. Well, it is so yeah, you see a snake and you're scared. But if it were light, That's actually a rope, right? So the object of attention, the rope, and the object of apprehension, the snake, are not the same, right? Because my conceptual consciousness starts, the gears start going, right? And it starts like thinking, okay, oh my God, this could be a snake, it's gonna bite, all this stuff, right? And so that's why, that's how our mind works. And of course, that's what it's designed to do, because that's what survival is about, right? We need to label things. We need to know which person might harm me, and so I should dislike the person and so on, so that I can survive. So, but we need to recognize that what our mind throws up is not actually how things are, right? And of course, if you take it to the most logical conclusion, then everything, what you see when you see an object is what actually appears to you is the emptiness of the object, but what you see is actually the object, right? That's why that's the ultimate, the ignorance, of how reality exists, right? Anyway, did I answer your question, Kathleen?
I'm still a little bit confused about the object of apprehension. Is it the conceptual thoughts that we layer upon
Yeah,
the object of attention?
right. The object of attention is what actually the mind is perceiving, right? When it comes into contact, take the eye consciousness again, right? If it comes into contact with a square that has your picture on it, right? That's the object that it moves to, right? The eye consciousness moves to. So that's the object of attention. And the object of apprehension is what it perceives. In the eye's case, it's both one and the same. Always, unless unless I have jaundice and all that stuff. But if it's correct perception, then it's always the same. In the mental consciousness, when a person appears to me, even in flesh, right? The object of attention is the person, right? The person that appears to me with the head, with the shoulders, with the body, maybe wide or maybe narrow or tall but short, whatever it is, right? The mind, the person appears, and we see it. The mental consciousness, sees it just sees it, but then it applies all the stuff on top of it, right? That it's a person, that it's Kathleen, that I like her, all the other stuff that happens, right, comes on afterwards. So the object of attention there is the image of the person, but the object of apprehension is actually Kathleen, right? And it's not incorrect. I mean, it's not incorrect in the sense that, conceptually, yes, that's correct. That is Kathleen. But we need to know that there are two things that are happening here, right? And that's the problem that we all have, right? Is that we equate the two and we don't see them as different. And so we label people as good or bad, or, because, and we innately, I'm not just good or bad. It's like they're always good or always bad. That's how they appear to us. So, so yeah. So that's, yeah. Okay. And so there's, so all these, these 6 minds, right, that we have, there's certain, there's also, along with a mind arises what they call mental factors, qualities of, for want of a better word, qualities of the mind. And they say there's 15 mental factors really, but they actually point out 51 of them. I'm not going to go through the 51, don't worry. But and they point out there's like 51 mental factors, that arise with the mind, right? So some are virtuous, some are non-virtuous, and so forth and so on, right? But like the minds always have, I'm not going to go through all these, but there's like, like the fact that, when, for the mental consciousness, like, for example, when I see Kathleen, or the image of Kathleen appears to my mind, I may say, some feeling appears, a feeling meaning like I like her, I dislike her, that kind of feeling, right? Not like feeling as in like love and so forth and so on, right? Just the feeling here is just like and dislike, or I discriminate between, that's Kathleen and that's not Barbara, right? I discriminate between, so those are like, or attention, that is, my mind moves towards that object. So those are like mental factors that are always there when the mind appears. And then there's stuff that appears after that, right? Things that are virtuous, like faith, self-respect, confidence, or, compassion, or whatever it is, those kind of things, right? And then there's unwholesome ones that appear too, like anger or self-importance or, desire, attachment for something, right? So those are all things that appear, that our minds are always throwing up, right? So that's, and the reason I'm mentioning this is because that's how, I'm just talking about how the mind, anytime it perceives anything, it's not the way it perceives. There's a lot of stuff that that's what we see are actually a lot of things that are put on top of what we're actually seeing, right? And that's why they talk about all these mental factors. Yes, Barbara. Oh, you have to unmute yourself. Yes.
So the question that I have is, it's along the same line as the one that Kathleen asked. So I'm looking at a pen. I have a pen in my hand, so I can see, my eyes can see that this is a pen.
Yeah.
That's all my eyes can do, is see like the shape of it. And then I know that it's a pen. But then beyond that, is the apprehension, the story then that I tell about the pen?
Yes and no.
Is it?
Yes and no. So when your eye consciousness sees the pen, it's not seeing a pen. What it's seeing is the shape of the oblongness of the pen,
Yep.
or the color is black or blue or whatever, but it doesn't label it black or blue. It just sees color.
Right. And then
color.
Conventionally, we've named this shape and what it does as a pen.
And that's what the mental consciousness, the conceptual consciousness puts on top of what comes to it through the eye consciousness. Did that make sense?
And then we also then can build a story around it.
Right, that's right.
Whether it's a pen I like or I don't like, it's like a person. We build the story.
So what we have in our mental consciousness, we have a generic image of a pen, right? Because we built it up over time, because somebody told us when we were a child that that's a pen, and so on.
Yep.
And so we have a generic image of a pen. It seems to appear, the pen, the eye consciousness sends the shape and the color and so forth and so on to the mental consciousness, and so the mental consciousness then using the generic object, it basically says, oh, that's a pen, right? And what it sees is actually the pen, not the generic image of the pen, right? What it actually has in its mind, the mental consciousness, is really the image of the pen. It doesn't have the pen, right? But it equates the image with the pen itself, right? So it equates the image and the label become one and the same. Just like, I equate when you appear to my mental consciousness, when you appear to my eye consciousness and so forth and so on, the eye consciousness just, it just relays, it just sees Barbara with the, the blue, it sees the color of Barbara and so forth and so on, right? Shape of Barbara, right? And then the mental consciousness has a generic image from previous habit and so forth and so on to know what Barbara looks like. I have an image of Barbara in my mind. And so when these shapes and colors appear to me, my mental consciousness, I say, so that's Barbara. It can't be Kathleen, right? Because Kathleen's image that I have is not what's I can, what's being perceived by my sense consciousness, right? So
and then we take things another step by
Right.
starting to build a story.
Yeah. Then we have all the other mental factors that appear, right? But Barbara's, that because of previous habits or whatever, anger immediately arises, or compassion immediately arises, or whatever, whatever it is, right? So those other things appear along, in the second moment, or whatever you want to call it, So yeah, so those are all conceptual thoughts, right? Those are all conceptual things that appear.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So anyway, so it's important, that's important to know what, how we perceive. So that's kind of like a basic introduction to, to Buddhist epistemology, how we know what we know. And that's, so there you go. So the interesting thing is, so I talked about the clarity of the mind, the knowingness of the mind, and so that's the conventional nature of mind, right? If we are meditating on the mind, us ordinary beings again, if we're meditating on the mind and watch the thoughts go by, we get a perception of the reflective quality, the clarity of it, we get a perception of the form, like how it seems to be formless, we see that it's aware, all those things. In deep meditation, what you see is actually the conventional nature of mind, the actual mind as it is. The mind is clear, knowing, it's calm, it's passive, all this stuff, right? Like the depths of an ocean, the waves are always, there might be a tsunami going on up at the top, but deep down, it's calm, right? So and as you go to different levels of consciousness, different levels of meditative states. I shouldn't use the word consciousness because it's, that's a different term. So different meditative states, we go deeper and deeper, and we see the mind as calm, and we see its qualities, and clarity, knowingness, all this sort of stuff. But that's the conventional nature of the mind, right? The ultimate nature, of course, is its emptiness of inherent existence, right? So that's the kind of, sometimes, they say that people, after they've been meditating for a long time, they think they've gotten there, but what they actually see is the conventional nature. They don't see so it's important to kind of differentiate the two, the sort of conventional nature, the ultimate nature. And the interesting thing is, though, that all of us have the same kind of, we have the same conventional mind stream. The conventional nature of the mind stream is all the same, right? Right? I mean, Barbara's or Kathleen's clarity, knowingness is no different from my mind's clarity and knowingness, right? Or formlessness or whatever, right? But what's interesting, it's very different in its functioning, right? So if Kathleen appears to my mind and Kathleen appears to Barbara's mind, both of us will have quite different, or maybe same, but most of the time different mental factors that will arise, right? And just like any object, right? I mean, maybe a red Porsche is really attractive to me, but maybe not to Kathleen, right? But the same object is appearing, but our minds are functioning very differently, right? In my mind, maybe desire, arises. For Barbara, or for Kathleen, maybe aversion arises. I mean, she may just really hate the look of a Porsche. She may hate the color red. Who knows, right? So, and that's, and also, like, for example, what I liked as a child, is very different from what my mind as a child is very different from my mind as an adult, right? Or, effects of different cultures, and animals have totally different minds, right? When they, see a person, they look at it, and, they see the person totally differently than what I see, right? So, and all this is, so even though we have essentially the same mind streams, we also have separate mind streams, right? And really, I mean, and one interesting was a teacher once asked me, is he said, how is it that, like if you look at the Buddhas, right? The Buddhas all see the ultimate nature of mind, right? Ultimate nature of everything, right? Including the mind, of course, but they see the emptiness of everything, right? At all times. So their minds all are, they all have the Dharmakaya mind, right? The ultimate, they see the ultimate nature of mind. But then how come there are different Buddhas, right? And, so what are the mind streams of different Buddhas? If they're all kind of seeing the same ultimate nature, then how are they different, right? And it's kind of like the example that, or the example that he gave was, it's kind of like how you have different rivers that go to the same ocean, right? They're all the same, but they're all different, It's, and so all of us are kind of like that. We all have the same conventional mind and the ultimate mind too, also, the emptiness, right? But we all have separate mind streams, right? In that same quality of the, like that. So, and all because of karma, really, right? I mean, the reason that different things bring desire in me versus being aversion to Kathleen is all because of karma, right? Because of habits that I formed over endless lives, is being held in the continuity of my mind, right? In the mind that goes from life to life, the very subtle mind that goes from life to life, right? So all our minds are different in that respect, right? Because of the karmic seeds are different. But all our minds have the same kind of characteristics and the same qualities, the same abilities, the same way, function, the way they, to perceive things, all that stuff is still the same. It's just that karmic seeds make different mental factors arise for different people who look, perceive the same object of attention, right? Like the red Porsche, for example. So yes, Barbara.
So along those lines, those are different minds. But now with the mind that is in this body, associated with this body, it's beginningless and it's endless. What happens is it also karmic imprints? Like if I know in the past through teachings that I've been an animal. So that mind of an animal is very different than a mind of a person. So is it the karmic, how does that mind change?
Well, I mean, remember, so the mind, and again, here when we talk about mind, we're talking about the mental consciousness, right?
Yes.
The mental consciousness, the mental consciousness of us as an animal, when we were an animal, it's the same subtle mind that went from life to life. When we were an animal, we still had the same continuity. Continuity of mind was the same. It was it was the same mind stream. Let's call it that, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the coarse mind, I guess you want to call it. I don't know what the word. I don't remember the term now. But the coarse mind that actually perceives how animal perceives, the coarse mind that we had when we were an animal, is quite different from the mind that we have, coarse mind that I have as a human being. I don't know if an animal thinks. Okay, I have a couple of dogs. I don't know if they really think or not, right? They have a mind that's instinctual, right? So I don't know if that's conceptual or not, but certainly I know what a conceptual mind is because I can conceive and I can have conceptual thoughts in this life, right? So in that sense, the mind is different in how it functions in this life than in previous lives. But it's the same mind stream because in my last life as an animal, I would have had the same karmic imprints that I had 3 lives ago, right? That I have now, unless I purified it. And let's not go there, right? We're not purifying it. We're not, whatever. If we haven't purified it and stuff, we still have the same, I still have the karmic, my mind stream and the same karmic seeds left over from, 3 or 4 lifetimes ago. And, if I don't purify it in this life, we'll have the same karmic imprints in the next life that I have, right? So the mind stream continues, the continuity of the mind continues, but it takes different, I don't know what the word is, not shapes, but different, different functioning, different, how it can function. Let's put it that way, right? Did that make sense?
It does, and I guess I'm just wondering how that happens, how that different function, because it's all the same mind stream.
It's karmic seeds, right? I mean,
Yeah. Okay.
Right? To be born as, there was some karma that I created to be born as an animal, right? And an animal, when it appears in a conventional form, has certain form, certain kind of form and certain kind of feeling and certain kind of discrimination, what it can discriminate, right? So remember, there's 5 omnipresent mental factors, like the form, there's the feeling, discrimination, attention, intention, and something else. There's always a rise, right? That mentioned. So those will function differently as an animal, right? Like the feeling function of a mind that would have appeared to me as an animal, like the feeling here meaning like and dislike, right, is a different feeling that would appear to me in this life. I have the same mind stream, the thing that holds the karmic imprints, but I have 2 different types of mind, mental consciousness, what it can do, abilities, I guess you'd say, right? Somebody else raised, yes. Is it Mary Jo? Is that what MJ Whiteman stands for? You raised your hand, MJ Whiteman. Oh, maybe not. Okay. In any case, so yeah, I hope that made sense. Yeah. So yeah, so that's another interesting question, and I'm not going to go into that here because I don't have an answer to it, but hopefully you will find an answer to it, which is that the mind, the subtle mind that goes from life to life, it still goes from life to life, right? So it's a conventional nature of it, right? It goes from life to life, but its ultimate nature, it still doesn't inherently exist, right? So how can that be? So that's the you can tell me when you found it. But in any case, I'll give okay. I'll tell you what was I told this, or did I read this? I can't remember, but this always worked for me. Like this is how I think about it, and maybe it will work for you, maybe it won't work for you. So, so the one that talked about the continuity of the mind, the example they used was like, let's take I don't know, I'm kind of digressing now, but anyway, if you have a seed, right? Let's say you have a seed, and it grows a little bit, and you call it a sprout, right? And then it grows, or maybe it's a seedling, I don't know, a seedling maybe, and then it becomes a sprout. It grows a little bit, it becomes a sprout. And then it grows a little bit more, it becomes, I don't know what the next thing is, plantling, little plant, whatever it is. Then it grows some more and, becomes a small tree, whatever that is, I don't know. And then, it grows some more and becomes a gigantic oak, right? So from a seed, it became an oak. So the interesting question is, what is it about the seed that, when did it stop being a seed and become a seedling? When did it stop becoming a seedling and then become a sprout? Right? At what moment, what instant did that happen? Right? And so forth and so on, and became a tree. At what point did it stop being a small tree and became a big giant tree? Right? So clearly, there are different things. We would never say the seed is the same as a tree, right? But there is still something that continues. There's a continuity, right? From the seed to the seedling, to the sprout, to the so on, or so on, right? Because if we had two different seeds, one was an oak seed or, whatever, one is a pine thing, right? We wouldn't say they're the same, right? We wouldn't say this pine seed grew into an oak tree, right? So there is obviously each have its individuality. But there is something that continuity that goes, right? That becomes an oak. So anyway, so that's something to think about, right? So that kind of made sense to me. That's as far as I got. I'm just letting you know. If you get further, please tell me. And so yeah, so if that, so that's kind of how our mind stream goes from life to life, even though we take different shapes and forms and have different mental capacities. But the karmic imprints continue, right? But that thing that continues still does not inherently exist, right? That seed, the thing that continues between the seed and the sprout does not inherently exist. It doesn't exist, its ultimate nature is still its emptiness, right? Because without the sun and the rain and all this other stuff, it's dependent on causes and conditions, right? Because without the sun and the rain and the fertilizer, whatever it is, soil, it wouldn't sprout, period, right? It would just stay a seed. So it depends on causes and conditions. It depends on parts, right? A tree cannot be there without its branches and leaves and so forth and so on. Same with the sprout, same with the seedling, right? So it depends on parts. And finally, depends on the label, right? That we say it's a seed or a seedling or a sprout or so forth and so on, right? So there's three ways that it depends. It's dependent, right? It's not permanent. I mean, it's not inherently existent because of those things, right? Because if it were inherently existent, then it wouldn't need the rain and the sun and so forth and so on. It wouldn't need the parts, and it wouldn't need the label. It would always, an alien would say it's a tree, even, right? So anyway, so there is a continuity between the seed and the sprout, and a continuity from life to life that holds a karmic imprint and so forth and on, but it still doesn't inherently exist. That's the conundrum. So anyway, I didn't mean to go this deep, but nevertheless, so I didn't get to it, but I wanted to talk about concentration meditation and the different qualities of alertness and what's the difference between alertness and mindfulness and so forth and so on, right? So we'll talk about that next week, which is our last class, I think. But in any case, so yeah, so maybe, so for homework, okay, any questions before? Yes, please unmute yourself though. Oh, you muted yourself again.
Gosh,
Okay.
there, how's that?
May I ask your name? What's your name?
Mary.
Oh, Mary. Hi. Okay, great, Mary. Please go.
It's not exactly a question, I think, but a comment. In the discussion just a little bit past, something was brought out which I never really thought about before, and it's very important, I think, and it's how the karmic seeds go forward into the future lives. And I've been doing the really nice Vajrapani breakfast that Claudio does on Saturday mornings, and somebody else does it also once in a while. But anyway, I always thought that that was beneficial for now, for this karmic purification now and past the past. But I never thought about it as going forward, how valuable it could be to purify what we can of the past as well as the present because of its going forward. So that was kind of, I don't know why I never thought of that before.
Well, yes, and that is you're absolutely right. It's very important to purify, stop it from going forward, because our past actions or actions within in this life can cause us to be born as an animal or in the hell realms or whatever it is in the next life, and we certainly don't want that. We want to at least have a human life,
Yeah.
and meet our gurus and all the conditions that make for progress.
Yeah.
But it's actually even more important than that, Mary. Not just because it goes forward, but because if you read the section and meditate on the section on karma in the Lamrim, you will see that karma not only goes from life to life, but karma also grows in its severity from life to life. Just like a oak seed grows into an oak tree,
Yeah.
if somebody doesn't stamp it out first.
Uh-huh.
Just like that, a small act, however minor in a way, right, whether virtuous or non-virtuous, by the way, can grow into have a giant impact if left unpurified, right? If it's non-virtuous, of course, you don't purify virtuous actions. But so there's many examples of this during the, Buddha talked about this, where, some great being during the Buddha's life, he said, okay, the reason he said, he achieved his realization and so forth and so on is because in some previous life, long time ago, he gave a bowl of milk to a passing monk who happened to be a Buddha or something like that, right?
Yeah.
Just that tiny little action was enough because it grew through all those lifetimes and finally ripened in gaining all those realizations, and that is following on many lives following to that, right? So just like that, non-virtuous actions also have great impact. So not only do we need to purify because we need to protect ourselves going forward so that we can have a human life, but also because any small action we do, that's why we do nightly Vajrasattvas, right? Purification practices. That's why one does every night. One does one every night, is because you want to think through your day, and anything that you've done, when I say you, I mean one does. So anything you have done that's non-virtuous, however minor, one should, use the four qualities of purification, regret, all this regret, resolution, so forth and so on, right? The 4 R's.
Mm-hmm.
In the Vajrasattva meditation, and purify whatever small thing you might have done. And conversely, if there's something good that you have done, it's always good, important to dedicate them. This is not part of the Vajrasattva meditation, but it's also just taught in general. It's important to dedicate them with either thinking about maybe a benefit to all sentient beings, which is compassion, or with the emptiness, which is that what I did is inherently non-existent, and the self that did it is also non-existent, and so forth and so on, non-inherently existent. So either one of those two, because then it seals that merit. So in other words, no amount of non-virtuous action in this life or any future life can take it away, right? Because one of the things about karma is that anything non-virtuous that you do can diminish any virtuous thing that you've done before too, if you haven't dedicated it, of course. So that's why it's important to dedicate virtuous actions and purify non-virtuous actions.
Great. Yeah.
So to talk about the two accumulation, very important. The two accumulation of merit and the accumulation of wisdom. Well, I'm sorry. They talk about the accumulation of merit and the purification of non-virtuous actions, right? So it's kind of the rain and the sun. It's like the fertilizer. They talk about how to plant a seed, to have an oak tree grow, you need to till the soil and so forth and so on for the seed, right? Which is the purification. To get rid of all the branches and so forth and so on, and then of course and then you also need to have the merit, which is the sun and the rain and all that stuff, so the seed can sprout, right? So it's same thing with our karmic seeds, right? We need to purify and we need to accumulate merit.
Yeah, thank you.
Very welcome. Okay, I think we should stop there. Let me share my screen for the dedication prayers. It went slightly over, I apologize. Okay, so dedication prayers. Oh, this one doesn't have I was gonna say, oh, this should have the emptiness. It uses compassion, I guess. This doesn't use emptiness so much. There are prayers with may the I that is empty achieve enlightenment, that is empty lead all beings who are empty to enlightenment by myself alone. So that's the bit in the dedication prayer that uses emptiness, right, to dedicate. And then, of course, there's this part, which is the compassion part. So anyway, so let's do the dedication prayer. Due to the merits of these virtuous actions, may I quickly attain the state of Guru Buddha and lead all living beings without exception into that enlightened state. May the supreme jewel bodhicitta that has not arisen arise and grow, and may that which has arisen not diminish, but increase more and more. And then in the longer prayer, you have the emptiness part after this. But anyway, all right. Long life prayers now. For holiness, the wish granting, wish fulfilling jewel, source of every single benefit and happiness in this world, to the incomparable kind Tenzin Gyatso, I beseech, may all your holy wishes be spontaneously fulfilled. You who uphold the subduer's moral way, who serve as a bountiful bearer of all, sustaining, preserving, and spreading Manjunath's victorious doctrine, who masterfully accomplish magnificent prayers honoring the three jewels, savior of myself and others, your disciples, please, please live long. And for Lama Oso, who is the current incarnation of Lama Yeshe, who was Rinpoche's teacher, as well as founded all our center, founded all our centers, yes. Venerable One, to you whose kindness exceeds that of all the conquerors, for those wanderers in far-off places, especially the West, mindful of your loving concern for us, and intentionally descending again into a family of a far distant land, we make this request. O Lama, please, please live long. Oh, I forgot. I got a show and tell. I found this in my room. This is it's called Zopa Frog. This was the little frog that Lama Zopa Rinpoche gave to my daughter many years ago when she was tiny. And he calls it a Zopa Frog. So there we go. So I have it on my desk. Anyway. All right. See you next week. Thank you for coming. Bye.